Hello, welcome back everyone. I hope that last week's video sparked some interest in you about how we can measure culture and you might be wondering now about some of those elements that we can measure so that we can become more aware of our culture, at the same time more aware of other people's point of view so that we can interact better, communicate better, create better working performances as a team. As I promised last week, today we are going to talk about one initial dimension, and in the course of the next few weeks, I will keep on talking about several different ones. But I thought it was important today start with this one because this actually answers to the question, how do you derive your identity? Interesting, isn't it? Have you ever thought, how do you derive your identity? So here is where I would like to introduce you to the interdependent versus independent continuum. So people that are very independent, they tend to derive their identity based on their actions, their results and achievements, and they are very focused, let me say, on the I. I did this, I obtained that, and all that. Vice versa, very interdependent people tend to look more at their identity as being part of a group. And so in that sense, they prefer harmony in the group, right? So think about what we have accomplished as a team. They speak in with the use of the word we a lot, right? And so, as I said, for them, group harmony is important. And it's much more about creating a unity that is beyond their self, okay? So when we talk about cultures in the sense of national culture, just to give you some example, the US tends to be much more independent versus, for example, Europe, that typically stands kind of like more interdependent in the continuum, swaying more towards the interdependent side. And Asian culture are even more on the interdependent side of this spectrum. As I said, everything is possible. It's a continuum, right? So it's not that you are either independent or interdependent. You can be placed in very different levels on this continuum, okay? Why do I say that? Well, for example, think about how Chinese, and in Chinese culture, right, it's very common to introduce yourself with your last name. That's like a great initial hint to the fact that you are part of a clan, right? Like you are part of your family. And so actually you are first a member of the family and then later on, let me say, your own individual, right? Vice versa, in a culture like the US, for example, Americans tend much more to look at their own self-accomplishment and independent. And there are a lot of people here that want to be self-sufficient, even in doing work in their house, for example, right? Like for me as an European, vice versa, I'm much more like, okay, I don't know how to change the tire of my car. I'll just go and get it done. You know what I'm saying? Versus over here, there are a lot of people that proudly, right, show the outcome of their personal work. How many people do I know in the US that are into woodworking? How many people do I know that have built their own sauna and their own garden, things like that, right? So these are all signs that the American culture tends to be more independent versus the Asian culture tend to be much more interdependent. And as I said, where the group unity matters the most. I will also say, related to this dimension, gender, because we talked about how culture is not only national, right? Culture, there are various elements that contribute to your individual culture. And one that really comes to mind related to this, it's definitely gender. Women, I would say, everywhere in the world, where, okay, I don't know every country in the world, so I don't want to sound, like giving this big statement without being, how can I say, supported by data. But in general, women tends to be socialized more as interdependent, while men tend to be more socialized as independent, right? Think about how women tend to want to maintain harmony in a group, the sisterhood, right? Or we don't want to ruffle any feathers, right? Versus for men, it's more socially acceptable to be assertive and make clear statement about what they want and what they desire. Okay. These are just a couple of thoughts about this independent versus in the interdependent continuum. The last thing that I want to say, there is, and I said it in my intro videos last week about all of this, there is not one right or wrong thing. Okay. I don't want anyone to think that independent people are selfish and interdependent people are not capable of being assertive. That's not at all what I'm saying, you guys. So please don't misunderstand this. It just means that where we put our own priorities tend to differ. And cultural adaptation and cultural competency comes from understanding that each and every one of us is in a different spot in this spectrum. And so how can I interact better with a person that is different from me? First of all, I need to be aware of where I'm standing, right? And at the same time, trying to understand where the other person is coming from so that we can find a good balance. Because I was just talking about this with a client of mine, and he was telling to me about how he's more interdependent and he feels that one of his reports is very independent. And now, for example, in praising the work of this person, it tends to be about how we have accomplished something and how this could potentially generate and trigger this person, because if he's independent and he gets rewarded on that might not resonate with him fully, right? And so it's much better to be very straightforward and say, you did this, you did a great job, right? Versus we did, and we as a team accomplished this. So this is just a little example of how these dimensions matter when you lead others, right? Understanding where they're coming from can be a game changer in how you provide feedback, how you communicate, and even how you reward people. Because if you want a reward to be felt as a reward, if it is in their language, it's so much more impactful, right, than just using a vanilla approach with everyone, right? So with an independent person, you will use the word you, versus with an interdependent person, they tend to be recognized as we, right? So this is just an example. And again, I don't want to say that there is a right or wrong way to do, but being aware of it help us understand how we can flex and stretch in a way that is meaningful for the person in front of us. So I am super curious, now that you have learned about this first dimension that answer the question, how do I derive my identity? Where do you think you're gonna stand on this dimension? Any thought about that? Would you like to have an assessment to really see where you stand in relationship to this specific dimension and other dimensions that are meaningful for effective teamwork? If you do, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I'll be very happy to provide you with the opportunity to take a self-assessment so that you can become more aware and more effective in how you cooperate with others. I am Simona Pappalardo, and I am a coach who helps frustrated global leaders and expats become culturally competent and fully engaged so that they can authentically connect with their teams and build success in their careers confidently. I'll talk to you next week with a new dimension. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.